Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, Content Specialist for the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which is part of the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Welcome to our Middle School Civics Highlights series. We'll be focusing our attention on Benchmark 2.5, describe the trial process and the role of juries in the administration of justice at the state and federal levels. In Part 1, we examine the significance of juries in the American legal system and explain the role of various aspects of the jury trial process. So we're going to be looking at the significance of juries, as well as how are juries selected and why jury trials are important. Let's look at a quote from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, who served as President of the United States. He is the person best known for writing the Declaration of Independence. He says, "I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution." So here what Jefferson is suggesting is that juries, a trial by jury, is something that was created as a vehicle for the government to uphold the principles of its Constitution. So note that he says only anchor. So therefore, we see the importance of juries and the significance of juries in terms of how they reflect and focus on the principles of the U.S. Constitution. There are two types of jury trials. A trial jury is also known as a petit jury, which decides whether the defendant committed the crime as charged in a criminal case or whether the defendant injured the plaintiff in a civil case. So what this tells us is that a trial jury is used in both criminal cases and civil cases. And note the use of the word petit. The French word for small is petite. So you can see how a trial jury is going to be smaller than the other type of jury that we'll be discussing right now. A grand jury, grand meaning large. A grand jury is presented with evidence from the U.S. attorney, the prosecutor in federal criminal cases. The grand jury determines whether there is probable cause to believe the individual has committed a crime and should be put on trial. So this is part of due process, right? By a grand jury determining whether or not there is a likelihood that the individual that is accused of a crime has committed that crime, they should then be put on trial. If the grand jury determines that there is enough evidence, an indictment will be issued against the defendant, the indictment being the charge against the defendant in this particular case. So a grand jury is going to be much larger than a trial jury. A grand jury doesn't decide innocence or guilt, doesn't lay blame, but rather the grand jury decides whether or not there will be a trial. So how are juries selected and why are jury trials important? Courts will first mail a jury summons to people randomly selected from compiled lists of registered voters and people with driver's licenses. Those who are selected must meet the qualifications. For example, having resided in the jurisdiction and not having been convicted of a felony. So in some states, individuals who have been convicted of felonies are eligible to vote after they have completed the terms of their sentence. So even though a person might be registered to vote doesn't mean that they wouldn't be disqualified from a jury because they convicted a felony. This pool of potential jurors will then be divided and assigned to different courtrooms. The prospective jurors will then be questioned by both the judges and the lawyers on both sides to determine if they can decide if the potential juror can decide the case impartially, meaning without bias. A prospective juror will be excluded if a lawyer can show to the judge that she or he might act unfairly in the trial, or there's also an opportunity that a prospective juror could be dismissed without cause, meaning that one of the attorneys or the judge makes the decision that that potential juror will not be serving on the jury. So why are jury trials important to a democratic society? We're going to be looking at this information that was compiled by the National Judicial College. The National Judicial College makes this important connection between jury trials and their role in a democratic society. And this is kind of interesting because when we think about democracy, we think about rule by the people. And it's the people who make up a jury. And it's also a person's right under the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights to have due process, which means that those individuals who are accused of crimes, they too are members of that democratic society. And they have a right for their case to be heard. They have a right to present evidence that defends themselves against the accusation. And so we might look at a jury trial as not being connected somehow to a democratic society, because when we think about a democratic society, we think of rule by the people, broad levels of participation, but there are these important elements of a democratic society, that a person has a right to be heard if they're accused of a crime, which means that there must be a jury, and that jury must be from the district or area where the crime was committed. So people who are from the community where the crime was committed have the right to decide if a crime was committed in their community, and if the person who's being placed on trial and accused of that crime committed that crime. So according to the National Judicial College, the American jury trial is a constitutional right. That's under the 6th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Jury trials are a vital part of America's system of checks and balances. Without a jury trial, then there could be some abuse of power from the judicial branch if they were to decide that somebody was guilty of a crime, or maybe from the executive branch, right? The executive branch is charged with enforcing the laws. So if the law enforcement decides, well, this person is guilty without a trial, without being judged by a jury of their peers, then that's a violation of checks and balances. So what this does is this takes the enforcement end, the arresting officers, and then the check comes from the judicial branch. The Founding Fathers also included jury trials in the Constitution because jury trials prevent tyranny, right? If it is that a jury of 9 people or 6 people or 12 people, whatever the size of the jury would be, if there's this decision made, then that means that these jurors, at least a majority, if not unanimously, have to come to the same conclusion. Now, there are some situations in some states where a jury may be divided, but that is rare. We also know that trial by jury is a unique part of America's democracy. So this means that it's unique because you have to be selected to participate as a juror, but the fact that you have an opportunity to defend yourself, that's a unique part of American democracy. Jury trials provide an opportunity for citizens to participate in the process of governing. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory, that they can play a role in determinations, and so it might help to give information to the legislative branch whether or not the law is clear enough as to what people may or may not do. Jury trials educate jurors about the justice system. Certainly that's true. I have served on juries, and I can tell you that I learned a lot in serving on a jury. Jury trials provide a method of peaceful dispute resolution. So a civil trial is one where one person sues another person because of something like property damage, would be property damage or something like that, where it may have been that one person suffered as a result of another person's actions. And so a jury trial provides a method of peaceful dispute resolution, again by that jury making a determination as to who was right in a particular civil matter. And jury trials offer the voice of the people to the civil and criminal justice systems. So this means that the people play a role in the civil and criminal justice systems when the jury system is in place. Thank you for joining me for Middle School Civics Highlights. Do you still have questions? Please contact us using the information that appears on the screen. Till next time, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine. Thank you for joining me.